unfortunately unable to see the live stream because we didn't get to live stream last Wednesday night. But anyway, so who was the main character that we looked at last week? Ahasuerus. And what were the main events that took place with Ahasuerus? He was a partier. He threw a party for about 6 months. For who? All the surrounding principalities that were there. And so he invited all those princes, all those rulers of those other areas. And so he invited them. So this was the 6-month party was a party of bigwigs, if you will. And we don't really know. We speculated a little bit as to why and what was the reason behind the party. We don't really know. But then what happened the next time? He had another party. How long was that party? 7 days. And who was that party for? Just whoever, locals, whoever wanted to come. Well, what was going on at the same time that he was having his party? His bride was having a party. The women were having their own party. And who is Ahasuerus' bride? Vashti. And as we got into the end of our study last week, what happened? She wouldn't show up. He called for her. In fact, sent how many men? 7. Sent 7 of his friends, of his counselors, to go and fetch them or fetch her and bring her back. I'm not going to say who said this, but they put it pretty well. Someone told me last week that if their husband sent 7 of his drunk buddies to pick them up, that she wouldn't come either. But she didn't come. And we look, and just before we get into verse 13, we see that in verse 12 it tells us very clearly his feelings towards her not coming. He was angry. He was not happy. And so, it says there at the end that his anger burned in him. And that is severe anger that he is. That's very mad. And so we pick up, and we're going to see his bigger response to her response of not coming. And so we pick up in verse number 13 of Esther chapter number 1. It says, "Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all that knew law and judgment. And next unto him was Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat the first in the kingdom. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law, because she hath not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains?" And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, "Vashti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes, and to all the people that are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes. When it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she." And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout all of his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both to great and small. And the saying pleased the king and the princes. And the king did according to the word of Memucan, for he sent letters into all the king's provinces, and to every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. Where to begin? Right? So, just as again, combining all of this from the first 12 verses that we looked at, what is something that we learned about Ahasuerus? What is something that we can know based on just those first 12 verses? Anybody have any thoughts about Ahasuerus? He enjoyed being in charge. He liked to be seen. He liked to show off. He wanted everybody to see what he had, his possessions, and even his wife. He wanted to flaunt her in front of all these people, and so do you sense a little bit of a prideful man here? I think prideful is definitely a way of describing Ahasuerus. And so, obviously, when we see that Vashti refuses to come, I mean, he's sent for her and she says, nope, I'm not coming. It angers him. And so we see in verse 13 that all of a sudden he's angry. And I see it when I read this, I see that he's seeking counsel. He's seeking counsel. I mean, it says that he said to the wise men, and it tells us a list of who was there. And then you get down to verse 15, which is where he really begins to ask them. It's where he really begins to ask the question. He says, what shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law, because she has not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. So he's got these wise men here, his counsel, if you will. And so he looks at them and he says, what should we do about this? Anybody have any problem with that? Yeah. So here, I mean, first of all, let me just say that he messed up by sending somebody else to get his wife. Okay? I think that's mistake number one. But when she, so he messed up there. And so, listen, when you begin things the wrong way, and I think this is how, life and spiritually, and no matter how we look at it, everything that we do, we got to start the right way. And so, when you think about it spiritually, or whether it be even making decisions that affect us physically or personally, not necessarily spiritually, but we should pray about everything, number one, should we not? We should seek God's guidance, number one. And so, I'm not saying that he should have sought God's guidance in whether or not he wanted to go get his wife, but, and we don't really know his motive. We don't know the whole, all we know is he wanted to bring her in, and we do know that he wanted to show her off. He wanted everybody to see his beautiful wife, which is, it's kind of crazy in my opinion, but again, he's prideful. And so, being prideful is a problem. There's nothing wrong with thinking that his wife's beautiful, but why do you want to flaunt her off in front of everybody else? Why you want to parade her around and all that kind of stuff? That doesn't make sense to me. But so he started off wrong, and then instead of him saying, let me go talk to her. Let me find out what's going on here. He seeks counsel. There's nothing wrong with seeking counsel. I'm completely okay with people seeking counsel. But you better make sure you're seeking godly counsel. Not all counsel is godly, by the way. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a preacher or somebody like that. But he sits here and he says, what do y'all think we ought to do? She refused to come. And so now he's going to talk to them about his problem. He wants to know, what are we supposed to do? Because she didn't obey my command as the king. Well, he gets a response in verse 16. And he's called these 7 counselors to figure out how to handle his marriage issues. And hey, again, I've already told you I'm not against seeking counsel, because I think, number one, it identifies that there's a problem, but it can't just be what the other person did wrong. We see anywhere in here where Ahasuerus considered anything that he could have done differently? No. It's all about her. It's all about the wrong that she did. And so maybe he's weak in that area and wants other people to tell him what he needs to do, or maybe he needs 7 people to really tell him how to figure out the next step. But it's in his mind, this is a big issue. It's a big issue. Now, I don't know how many men in here would, if you sent somebody to tell your wife to come here and she didn't come here, I don't know how many of you would burn with anger inside of you. I wouldn't. Because I know if I send somebody else to get my wife, she's probably not coming. If I want her, I better go get her myself. But here, whatever his purpose for asking, he gets exactly what he's looking for. And can I say that I think this is the case? We could use this in a husband-wife scenario, but can I tell you that is exactly the case in any kind of situation? If I have a problem with somebody else, and they see that, they know my side of the story. These guys don't know why she didn't come. They never gave a reason as to why. And so they know Ahasuerus' side of the story, don't they? And so whenever he says, what should we do? He's going to include them in his decision making. And so, he's the king. So he wants us on his side. So he gets exactly what he's looking for. He wants them to give the answer. I believe with all my heart that he wants them to give the answer that they do. He wants them to say that he needs to put her away. He wants them, and so we've seen that some of these guys, they offer advice, and they want him to send her away, and they want him to replace her with somebody who is more worthy, and it even gets down to the point here, and let me just tell you a little, let me even back up just a little bit, okay? Ahasuerus is going to heed the advice that we've already seen. He's going to heed this advice, and really what he's going to do is he's going to show himself unreasonable, and wrong. I personally believe he should have honored the dignity of his queen. I believe that with all my heart. But if you ever go and do a little bit more digging and research on Ahasuerus, see, this is all we have right here. And it already paints a pretty dark picture of him, right? Anybody in here have a great ton of respect for the kind of man Ahasuerus is? No. That's right. That's right. He's drunk. And so it still doesn't paint a good picture of him, though, does it? Let me just tell you a little bit about the kind of man that Ahasuerus was. There was an occasion where he executed builders of a bridge. Okay? He executed the builders of a bridge because an ocean storm destroyed it. Basically, a hurricane, something like that, came along, strong storm, and it destroys the bridge. So he had the builders of the bridge killed. And then it goes even a little bit further of how ridiculous, in my opinion, he is, that he then commanded that the water and the waves be whipped and chained to punish the sea. Yeah. Paulie had been drinking a little bit that day too. Just not in his right mind. And so, the objective, his stated objective here after he heeds the advice is that all the ladies in the realm of the kingdom of Persia would respect their husbands. There ain't nothing wrong with that. Not a thing in the world wrong with a woman respecting her husband. However, I think what this is meant to do, because when you look at it, you look at verse 16. This Memucan, or whatever his name is, moron is what we could replace that with, answered before the king and the princes. Look what he says. Vashti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only. Oh, she hasn't just offended you, O king. She hasn't just done you wrong. But he says also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. So he says, listen, this is not just against you. She's not just done wrong against you. She's done wrong against you. She's done wrong against all the princes of the kingdom of Persia. She's done wrong to all of the people of Persia. Every one of us. So basically, she has offended and done wrong to the whole kingdom by refusing to come at his call so he could flaunt her off. This is what this man says. So what does he say? How do we respond to this? Because she's done all of us wrong. And so he says in verse 17, for this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women. This is because she's done this, this is going to be the results kingdom-wide. Kingdom-wide. Now listen to him. He says, abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes when it shall be reported. Because she's done this, because she refused to come here for you, word's going to spread. Word's going to spread. You know what that's going to do? All the women in the kingdom are going to despise their husbands. That's some great wisdom right there, isn't it? It's just how it's going to work. It's got to be that way. Because surely everybody in the kingdom, first of all, is going to hear about it, and they're all going to, this is how it's all going to happen whenever, it gets reported. The king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. Man, does that not sound like something the media would do today? That they would just publish that just out of spite. That this is what's, listen to this story. Oh my goodness. I mean, just what he said there sounds like something you'd see on one of the top news channels in America. That the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. And that's it. Ahasuerus was drunk and sent 7 of his men to go and bring her into his chambers or wherever this courtyard party was going on, so that he could flaunt her and show her off to all the people. Now that changes the whole news story, don't it? Yeah. I mean, y'all may disagree with me, but I think that changes the whole news story. And so this is what they're going to report, is that, oh, the queen just refused to come in at the king's command. Some things don't ever change, do they? And so because this is how it's going to be reported, he says, likewise the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes, which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. Oh, once this is reported, it's just going to make a mess. It's going to make a stink. Well, that's the purpose of it, isn't it? Isn't that why folks like to report stuff like that? Only tell half-truths, because it creates such a stink. And so he said, this is going to cause a mess in the kingdom. This is a big deal. And so he says, if it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before the king Ahasuerus. And let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. Make an example out of her. Put her away and give her royal estate to somebody else who's better than her. Well, you know that right there, for a man like Ahasuerus, man, that just had to send a light bulb off to think, he wanted to bring her in and show her off already, right? So you know in his mind he's thinking, I could have someone better. Yeah, that's what he's thinking. I guarantee it. So he wanted the king, he said, and when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all his empire, for it's great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both great and small. Now, let me just tell you, I've already said this a little bit. That part right there, that the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both great and small, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, I believe when we, look at in the book of Ephesians, I believe that Paul, in setting up the order of the home and talking about the husband being the head of the wife, again, that's not, and that's a whole other study, but that's not a dictatorship. But the wife should submit herself under her husband. That means that she's to honor and respect him as the leader, the head of the home. That's his responsibility. That's how God designed it to be. And so it's not that he's trying to be King Ahasuerus and just, dictate everything and want everybody to do everything that he says. That's not how it works. But it's an honor and respect. And, can I just tell you that, by the way, honor and respect is not something you can demand? Honor and respect is not something that you can demand. Because, listen, I'm just going to be honest with you. Honor and respect, if it's not freely given, is not worth anything. It's worthless. And so here, they're trying to set this decree up to demand that these women honor and respect their husbands. Again, biblical truth, but not the way they're trying to do it. You got to love the fact that he continues to mention the effect that this is going to have on the princes. This is the effect they're going to have on the princes. And, listen, very clearly, this man, Memucan, however you say his name, his ideas are extremely selfish. He is he's looking out for himself right now. Because guess what? He's one of those princes. So if he can take this decree back, then hey, he's going to be able to lay down the law to his wife, and that's how it's going to be. He may not have been. He may not have been. Yeah. Yeah, don't let it be changed. That's right. He sees the need to bolster his superficiality, superficiality is strong, but underlying weak empire. He says, for it is great. Is it really great? It may have been great in size, but was it really a great empire? I think that's yet to be seen. But, these great and mighty men, I'm just going to be honest with you, they can't even get their own wives to cooperate with them. I think they got bigger problems. They have bigger problems, and I'm sure that any Jews that were listening to this or ever heard this, they, I imagine they thought, man, these guys are pathetic and laughable. Because listen, the Jews, they knew, they understood, and so he says that he wants the king needs to send this decree out. And in verse 21, he says, in the saying, please the king and the princes. And the king did according to the word of Mimi. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of a group of guys in the locker room, and they're all around, and then one of them's complaining about his home life, and man, you just won't believe. And these guys sit down, and they formulate a plan. They pitch ideas, and you got one guy that, man, he's the expert. That's Memucan. He's the expert. Let's do this. Everybody says, yeah, that's a good idea. I like that. Here's Ahasuerus. It pleased him. He liked that idea. Why? Because who did it benefit? Them. They didn't care anything about their wives and how they felt. They just wanted it to be about them. Again, selfishness. Selfishness. Verse 22 says, for he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. Sends 127 letters. And the gist of the letter was that every man should be the master of his own home. It would be translated in every language and script used throughout the vast multicultural Persian Empire. I mean, that's why, it says that, it needed to be put in different languages according to their, to each province. And, it's amazing to me that such a big, strong empire needed to send out such a letter stating an obvious fact. Again, their purpose was not because they felt like the man. They just wanted to be able to dictate. All about them. And can I tell you, that's not, if we want to get into the marriage side of it, that's not what a marriage is. It's not what any relationship is. Yes, God said that the husband is to be the head of his home. I believe that. The wife, but we often we move past. We like to talk about that part, and we like to talk about the fact that it says that the wives are submit themselves unto their husband, but don't leave out the fact that it says that husbands are to love their wives, even as Christ loved the church. Do you know, if Ahasuerus really loved Vashti in the way that Christ loved the church, there would have been no issue whatsoever. But that wasn't how his love was obviously a little bit of a superficial love. It was a surface level love. And then he began to seek counsel. I'm just going to, let me tell you tonight, be careful who you seek counsel from. Because all counsel is not godly counsel. He sought counsel from the wrong people. And it ended up turning into something that it didn't really need to be. And we're going to continue to look, and he's going to put out, he puts Vashti away, and he's going to begin a search for a new queen. And so next week we'll pick up in chapter 2. Do y'all have any thoughts, comments, questions? Oh, yeah. 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 Well, and a lot of times in those times it was not common for the women to be in there where the men were at, and and so really, again, another, it all goes back to how you start things out. I go back and I think about when you read about the chapter in Samuel where it talks about when David had his situation with Bathsheba. We miss the fact that a lot of times that it tells us right there at the beginning at a time when kings went to war. Well, David decided he wasn't going to go to war. He was the king. Decided to stay home. His place was supposed to be out there at war. What made him decide to stay home? He did something, he put himself in a bad spot. He should have been there with his men. And so, again, that one wrong decision, how he started it out, led to a mess and would affect him for a long time to come. Amen. Anybody have any other thoughts, comments? This situation, yeah, oh yeah. The council, yeah, really. Yeah. Yep. And he still never even went into, as far as our knowledge, we don't have any record of him going and sitting down and talking to Vashti. That's good for a relationship, isn't it? No communication. That's what he's saying. That's his whole thing is, look, we can't let her do this because if when my wife hears that the king's wife didn't come, what am I going to do? Because she's not going to come. That's just kind of how we got to put a stop to this. King, if you don't do something, this is going to create a mess. And so they do. Anybody else have any thoughts, comments, questions? No, definitely not wise to make decisions. Period. When you've been doing what he's been doing, when you're under the influence, he was under the influence of the wrong thing. If he'd have been under the influence of the Holy Spirit, he wouldn't have had that problem. But yeah. So I don't know how far in chapter 2 we're going to go next week, but maybe just kind of look at the whole chapter if you get a chance, and we'll figure out the rest later. So, anybody else have anything tonight? If not, we're going to go to the Lord in prayer before we have our business meeting. Father, we thank you so much for this day. Lord, we thank you for this time that you've allowed us to have together here tonight. And Lord, I just pray, God, that, Lord, we would make sure that we seek godly counsel whenever we need counsel. And Lord, that we would not make irrational decisions and, Lord, just allow ourselves to be influenced by the wrong things in this life, God. And Lord, that we would use your word as a guide, as you told us that your word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. God, I just pray that you would be with us tonight as we get ready to go into this business meeting. Lord, I just pray that everything that is said and done would honor and glorify you. And Lord, that you would just be with us, guide us, and direct us. Lord, again, we love you, we thank you, and we ask all these things in Christ's name. Amen.